think this is nice weather down here, huh? It's wonderful. I think my hometown is Bradford, Pennsylvania, and I think it was one of the coldest spots in the nation the other night. So it's right up there, close to Buffalo.
Think twice.
Well, that's why I'm down here. I got down here and liked the weather a lot better. So. Plus the cornbread and peas.
The floors are cypress and they are original. Dr. Duncan added an extension on each end after 1830, and that is longleaf pine. You're going to go through that as you go through. Excuse me. All right, we're going to have to push this through because she's going to tell about everything and you don't want to be hearing everything. No, we have a 30 minutes. That's right. You're on a bus.
This is the library of the home. Over the mantel is Henry Clay. He's a friend of Dr. Duncan, and he visited here quite often. He stayed at Unleaf if he might stay here. He did visit with Dr. Duncan quite a bit. They were very good friends. The mantel is one of three that Dr. Duncan placed in the home after he purchased this house. And he added this wing after he bought the home in 1826. He also added the wing where the gift shop is. And you'll notice the floors in this room are pine and the rest of the house is cypress. That's because the different builder added this wing. Over here on the front wall is one of the Duncan sons, and underneath this is the picture for the thing.
Good to have you. Is this everybody? Where y'all, where you ladies?
Oops, excuse me.
Oh, where? Holly? Okay.
Close to everything.
Y'all, the road is over 200 years old. This was one of our first major purchases that I made. And this is Empire, this is Regency around 1810. And y'all, we just purchased these dishes about a couple of months ago. And they tell us they were originally broken off. But we purchased 106 pieces. And we're thrilled to death to get it. But it's paddle and china. And we don't know what the pattern is, but we've had people come through and say, I'm going to send you the name because they know somebody that does it. The chandelier depicts nature starting at the top. You see the oak leaves, the bough hanging upside down, the rope, and the stacked ones underneath it. And see the little tassels? It was original for gas, and that's how they regulated the lights. This is a portrait of Dr. Duncan that was painted before he moved to New York City. And it has that little technique that wherever you're standing, he has that eye-to-eye contact with you. But I want you to walk around and look because it looks like his whole face moves with you. But y'all sort of mose around and look. And that is an Italian marble mantel. But let me tell you, underneath it, we have a copy of his death certificate, and his occupation was a gentleman. I said, well, that's a pretty good handle to hang on anybody. But this is an Italian marble mantle. These are called girandoles. This is typical lighting of a home around 1810. Pardon me. And this is Empire about 1840. Do y'all know what this is? This is a cheese keeper. You know the old cooked cheese? Well, that's the cheese keeper. This is the only original silver that we have. This was Stevens, the one that was sitting in there with his foot on the desk. But this is made from coins. And this is a fly catcher. Are y'all familiar with a fly catcher? Well, some of them are frosted, and I said I would have wanted a frosted one. I would have wanted to see all the bugs do their wiggling. The mirror frame was made down in Lafayette, Louisiana, around 1810. The mirror has been replaced while they were filming Huckleberry Finn. They filmed some of Huckleberry Finn here in 1973, but while they were filming Huckleberry Finn, they moved it from this wall over here, and it fell. So they had to replace the mirror, do a little restoration on the frame. Now, to me, that has the country look, don't you think so? So I'm going to let you go right on into the into the.
And it stands for import It's very unusual, and it is a pure table, not a petticoat. On each, the leg on each side is one's beak, see the beakless one, and its tail is the canvas leaf in the back. The difference in the pure table and the petticoat does not have the shell. These little shells, they said they made them so that they set little lamps on it to reflect the light because the homes are so dark. And she made it real nice. But here, proud of this too. And this particular old family is in Natchez under the hill from the Louisiana side of the river. It's Natchez under the hill from the Louisiana side of the river in the late 1800s. And the artist was his first thing.
American Gothic chairs you saw in the library with green seats, they were in here. And there was a wonderful settee to match those chairs, but we didn't get the settee. So anyway, in the 60s, when the ladies took over the house, there was no furniture, and people got into the spirit of things and started bringing things over. And someone brought us this little Victorian parlor set. It's hand-carved rosewood, and we don't know who brought it because those members in the 60s kept no records. They just accepted everything that was of the same century. Actually, the Victorian furniture is late for this early house, but we were glad to have it. We're still glad to have it. We wanted to get it on a tour and on the pilgrimage. Over the doors. And then for in our weeks, the New York architect came down here, playing the house, and pineapple is very prominent, and we still know it. This is not original, but it is dated with her and this room probably would have had a gas lid, like the one in the dining room, or real oil lamps. So the mirrors were important to reflect the light. The more reflection, the brighter the room would be. Showing that mirror in this room when the Duncan family was here. But it wasn't here when the ladies took over the house. And then it turned up again. So the only thing we can assume is that whoever purchased it at the 1920s sale was local, and the ladies were begging for it. See how that moves and made my day.
But he did visit a lot in his home, so we've named the room for him. Here's a lithograph of Henry Clay. This room was the same size as the dining room downstairs. In fact, the top floor and the bottom floor plans are identical. But when we had a resident manager here, this wall was put in, and this was kitchen, small kitchen, and bathroom. It just made him kind of an apartment. This is a bed from the New Orleans area. We've only had it a few years. As I'm sure they told you downstairs, we have very few of the original furnishings. This is a lady's dresser, also built in the New Orleans area with the French marble. You can see from the mirror how short the ladies were then.
They were short.
And tables and chairs.
Yeah, you look at these chairs, when we go through this next little room, you'll see how short the ladies were. I can just see them sipping their tea and doing their needlework.
medical practice. Naturally, it's not the original cover, but the settee is from his practice. And this is a Mr. Excuse me. Let me get behind you with him. And the table from the Empire time. And one gentleman asked me, he said, who gets the rocker? I said, the mama does. The mama rocked the babies. Back then, the men didn't touch them until they were nearly a year old, I don't think. I couldn't have gotten by without mine. I guess back then they had all the servants to help. And the men didn't feel like. And this is a painting of the artist's wife that you saw downstairs, all the paintings. This is his wife. Notice the fan, the Queen of Spain. As we go through, this is just a little back the green chairs that you saw in the library. Sent these three pieces to others. She said that it looked like it needed to be in this home. And the way you can tell, my lord, that each piece will have the egg and fruit on each side. See if that's it there, and on each of the side pieces, the vanity has it on there. And I'm not sure, I don't know whether that is Millard for sure or not, but she did send that back. You know what this is for? Hold the mosquito netting. Somebody told me that there was an opening somewhere where they stored their valuables, but we haven't found an opening either. This still has a horsehair mattress. You know, that was the best you could get back then. But there's another mattress on top of it. This is horsehair. The slipper sofa is horsehair. That usually is at the foot of the bed, but we moved it so you could see the bed. And this fireplace has been converted to coke. You can see what a shallow fireplace you have to have to coke.
Is that the difference?
Usually there's a basket that goes in under.
Well, they kept it long as he was the Spanish governor, and after that it changed hands I don't know how many times until 1927. Actually, the Montgomery family had it close to 100 years, but some other people had it some too. Anyway, in 1927, Catherine and Balfour Miller bought it, and they're the ones responsible for the restoration and the furnishings. Catherine Miller also started this Natchez Spring Pilgrimage. In 1932, the ladies in the Garden Club were planning on having a big flower show, and people were coming from here, yonder, and everywhere to see flowers. A late bad weather ice storm came along and messed up the garden show, and Catherine Miller was a smart lady. She did some improvising. She got 9 of her lady friends to join her, and they put on their grandmother's wedding dresses, which were hoop skirts, and they started showing houses instead of gardens. And that's how we got in this business. It's grown every year. Today there's 32 houses on the spring pilgrimage, about 20 on the fall pilgrimage, and about a dozen that are open year-round.
And they were arrested because they found some ground that would, clay that would make that gorgeous home. And they were digging into the streets. They were like,
And look what happened. That is an American-made, hand-carved, hand-cut. This is, of course, Hope Farm. And you all are in a bed and breakfast house. And how would you like to have a beautiful breakfast at this wonderful Duncan 5 table? You can do it. This table is actually 3 tables that were made together, and then they're able to be separated to utilize in different ways, and then they were put back together to have a meal. It's dated 1840, and of course this table has been reproduced by the historic Natchez collection. Pardon me, the porcelains in the center of the table are by Dorothy Dowdy, an English lady who came to the United States in 1920. She returned to England and had the pieces that she wanted created, commissioned. Each piece is signed and limited, and they were the instructions were that upon her death, each mold would be destroyed
and she has passed away. She passed away quite a few years ago. And so each piece is, there are no more. The two large pieces in the center are a pair of the Southern Magnolia with the Magnolia Warbler. And there are only two pair known to exist today in this condition. The others are the Bay Magnolia with the Parula Warbler, the Phoebe on the Flame Vine, the Tulip Poplar with the Baltimore Orioles. You see? They're beautiful. The China is Old Paris. Now, Old Paris is a generic term which means nothing but a location. It's dated 1850, and we call it the Hope Farm China. Originally quite extensive, it still has 209 pieces in the set, most of which is housed in this China Cannon pieces. The water pitcher here is a sterling silver piece by Theodore Starr, the silversmith with Black Star and Frost, a company which later became Gorham. This is dated 1840. Now, the small port wine pitcher is 1847. It's a signed Tiffany piece, and there's the stamp M for Edward Moore, the original silversmith for Tiffany, one of the founders. Beautiful little picture. Above the table is a Waterford Chandelier, very early. It operates on a pulley and chain system. They would lower it to replace the candle and then hike it back up to the ceiling. And the diffuser was used to prevent the smoke from staining the ceiling. Now, Mrs. Banta bought everything in the house that you see, with the exception of a few items that she brought from her home that were significant to her. And when she came back to Natchez and bought her farm, she brought with her the pair of mirrors that you see on this wall by Robert Adam in 1750. They had been in her husband's family for generations, and she brought them with her on the airplane, as a matter of fact. Very beautiful. There's a very interesting story behind the sideboard here. She found it at a garage sale, and it was painted green. She paid $15 for it.
Paid $15 for that at a garage sale.
We don't know what it cost to have it refinished. The cornices above the windows are metal covered in gold leaf, as are the holdbacks. And you all feel free to look around, and then I'll send you on into Mandy in the parlor. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Well, what was the eventual, what did they discover about that? Who made it and how old is it?
Oh, I don't think it's a signed piece. You know, it's just American made empire.
It's just American made empire,
Yeah.
which is beautiful.
Well, and that's, I mean, you know.
$15.
$2.30, and all four of these pieces are made from that wood, which makes them very rare. The pier table in the center, as well as the clock on the mantel, are also made in styles of Charles X as well. The irons on the mantel are English Derby and are dated 1780. They're hand painted in gold leaf, which makes them a great example from that time period. The large secretary here is Joseph Meeks & Sons. This was a large company in New York City in 1830, and they're always noted for their graceful designs. The piano on the other side of the room is an 8-inch shear. It was made in Philadelphia and dates 1817. If you'll notice, it has a short keyboard, only 42 keys. This was very popular in the early pianos. Now, the piano stool, is a Duncan 5, and the portrait on the piano, as well as above, are portraits of Catherine Miller, previous owner of Hope Farm. The pictures on the round table are of Don Carlos de Grand Pré, who was at one time our Spanish governor. These photos were sent to us by his descendants in Baton Rouge. In the first photo, he's 19, and then again, he's 60. The rug in this room is an Indio Aubusson rug. It was stitched in wool, and the Aubusson design chain and dates to 1900. On the wall directly behind you above, the cornices, they are wooden, hand-carved with gold leafing. They date to 1810 and have the original fittings for Venetian blinds. And the portrait on this wall is of Mrs. Banta, the owner of Hope Farm, which you all will get to speak with in the next room.
It's so wonderful. Between 1830 and 1840, the Indians from all over the United States went to Washington and had their portraits painted in oil. They hung those oils in the old Smithsonian, and people like Mr. Boyd in 1836 lithographed and hand-painted from the oils, leaving us this wonderful collection. A good thing, because the old Smithsonian destroyed all the portraits but 8. Honestly, not many ladies in the official delegation. I have one of the few ladies. She's the young wife of a chief, and her name is Acre of Delight. Isn't she cute? She is pretty. The vases on the mantel are old Paris. Now, in those days, they had winter dressing and summer dressing. They would take off the silk and put on the cotton or the chintz, and when they did, they turned their vase. So old Paris, early old Paris, will have a scene on both sides. This little chest and that little chest are salesmen's samples. The salesman would take the little chest from family to family, and if you like the little one, they'd make you a big one, often staying right on the place. This one is Hepplewhite in design, and that one's Sheraton.
This is the 1775 home. There are 4 bedrooms and a kitchen, and this is called the sitting room. You won't be touring the 4 bedrooms. Those are used as B&B rooms today. There are 3 above us, 1 between this room and the end is the kitchen. Come right in, folks.
You better be careful.
The floorboards y'all are standing on are cypress, and that was a commonly used wood in those days because of its durability, and they also say that termites don't like it. Now, this chair beside me was designed by Thomas Jefferson. The twin to this chair is at his home at Monticello, and the table beside me is a hunt table made right here in Natchez. It was made out of solid cherry and has a couple of Toby Tobias pictures on it. The corner chair was made in Louisiana. That was designed to help keep the grandmother warm. It has a built-in footrest, and it also has a drawer to help hold her shawl or her wrap. The center table is a birdcage table made in Philadelphia in 1780. It has a mechanism underneath it that allows it to tilt, and it also rotates. And the china on it is Chinese export. It dates to 1800. On the mantel is a pair of old Paris porcelain vases, very popular here in Natchez. One side has the summer scene, and the other side has the winter scene. The little French china teapot was sometimes kept at the bedside table of a sick person, and you could put a candle underneath there to help keep the tea or the medicine warm. That photograph of Robert E. Lee was taken after the surrender, and the reason it's at this home, Balfour Miller was a descendant of Robert E. Lee. Now, above us there are 3 bedrooms, and in between this room and the kitchen is the other bedroom, but they're not.
As soon as I get everyone in, then I tell y'all about a few things in here. Okay, all right. First, what we have here, this is called the child's punishment chair. The child had to stand in like this. You lock the feet in, put the arms in here, and you lock the arms in. So they had 2 different sizes. They had it for the small kids and for the big children.
Wow. That's around. Better behave. Well, when you have 11, I guess you got to do something.
Yes. And the Indian head that sits on the mantel right there came off the Natchez steamboat, which is a picture of the boat right there on your right-hand side. The machine down on the end that looks like an old ringer-top washer is actually called a beaten biscuit machine. They made up their flour dough and put them through the rollers until it comes out thin like crackers or either a pastry or a pie. The map on the wall, that is the map of the state of Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama, and it's dated 1839. So y'all feel free to look around. If you have any questions, just ask and I'll try to answer them for you.
Now, where's her present day kitchen?
Behind the dining room. You can't eat behind that.
So would that be a desk? Would there be a desk in the kitchen?
Well, I guess most of the stuff they just put down in here. You know, just probably.
The house has walls 14
18 inches thick. They're brick, plastered, scored off like stone or marble, and that was unavailable here, the size of the column. They made it look that way on a lot of the Greek Revival homes. The door was cypress, it is cypress, all the baseboards and doors. It's a cheap wood, plentiful, bug resistant, it was used a lot. And then to make it a fancier door though, they had it faux grain mahogany, even in 1800, and it has been recently redone. The Jeopardy moldings though, from the beginning were made of sawdust and glue. Poured in molds, hardened and attached with glue to the door in various places across the front of the house. About a month ago, Mr. Hines had the house repainted, and for years they had thought, and just in paper.
Oh, keeping you warm. Did y'all hear the history, all that you wanted to hear? We're going in, start to right.
Everybody always wants to know where the books are. Well, it originally had bookshelves lining the walls, but it's been turned into more of a sitting room. These windows are called Jeffersonian windows, and they were named for our third president, Thomas Jefferson, who designed them. They were used for ventilation in our hot Mississippi summers. This chair right here is called a sword chair, and it was designed for a soldier to sit in. He could leave his sword on when he sat down, and it would just hang off to the side. It's also called a corner chair because it fits up in the corner and shows off its one decorative leg there to the right. Throughout the house, you'll want to take note of all the mantles. They're all made of Italian marble, as this one is, and they're in several different colors. The ladies above the mantle are Mr. Hines' daughters, Adrian and Adair. The portrait above the sofa, we think was painted by an Italian apprentice. The reason we think that is because there's no signature. The apprentices were not allowed to sign their work. The ceilings are 15.5 feet high, and the walls are covered with fabric. Do y'all have any questions about the library? Okay. Well, y'all can step straight across the hall.
I'd like to welcome you all to the formal dining room. The dining room furniture is late 19th century American. It's mahogany inlaid with satin wood. The candelabra on the dining table are French Empire. They're bronze and gold on marble bases and date around 1840. The piece in the center of the table is called the fernery, and it dates 1850s. The fireplace is original to the home. It's Italian Sienna marble, and the candelabra on the mantel are Irish crystal. The wallpaper is French. It's a Zuber print. It was printed sometime before World War I from wood blocks that had been carved in 1855. It's a very difficult procedure, and they believe there were just 2 printings. This is one of 4 prints in existence today, and the wood blocks have been destroyed. It depicts the zones of the world: over the mantel, the Arctic; over the sideboard, the temperate; and on the back wall, the tropical zone. Now, if you'll notice, there are spots on the paper. During World War I, these prints were rolled up and stored in deep caves in France for their protection. And while in the caves, the dampness caused them to mildew. The prints were purchased in 1976 by the Hines family. This was the same year they purchased them, and they were installed at that time. The service plate on the dining table is ascot by Wedgwood. The dinner plate was made for Baby Banks in Philadelphia. The cup and saucer is Minton china. It was made in England for Tiffany. And the crystal came from the Carpenter family's collection. They were the family who lived here prior to the Hines.
Do you have any questions?
This Southern Living, this is the picture of me holding a little dress that I wore in 1932. My mother found this in the attic. It probably belonged to my grandmother. And it's over in the bedroom, on the bed. So I've been right here in Greenleaf's every year since the very first pilgrimage. There's also a little picture taken in 1932, my mother and I, standing right there where the cat is. And I have on this little dress. So I've been here for, you all want to get, are you going through?
With the big family and lots of children, how do you decide who gets the house?
Well, actually, the house belongs to all. While my mother was still living, we made it into a family business corporation. So, the Waterloo is a French sword. It was given to Colonel Daniel Belsu, who was in the Confederate Army. He was my great-grandmother's brother. He was carrying it when his horse was killed, and a bullet went through the scabbard there. Now, we cut wedding cakes with the Waterloo sword that we produced in the family. And there's a bullet hole over the door. Grandfather Coons was standing out on the front porch right after the war. When someone wrote out back to fire shot at
He's at sherry and sewing. I hope I never have to have false teeth. I can hear myself whistling over all those S's, sipping, sharing, sewing, and no doubt gossiping about their friends who had not been invited to the banquet that evening. Men sat in the next room, having brandy and brandy snifters, talking money and banking, for this is a banking family's home. They had owned 2 houses up the next street over, Washington. If you are gluttons for punishment, you can pay in 2 of those 2 houses too. But I think by the time you tour this one, you will have seen enough and heard enough. Do come in. We're speaking of the family that still lives here today. They sold their 2 homes up Washington. Now, why was this house even for sale? Everyone in it had died. They died of yellow fever. Yellow fever was a scourge. It swept through these southern towns. They did not know what caused it. You either got well of it by yourself or you died of it. And so this house was empty, came up for sale with half a block of land. The gasoliers, the light fixtures overhead, and the black marble mantelpieces are all original to the 2 in this house over in the 1840s. This house is much older than that. That's one reason I don't like the 12 black marble mantelpieces that I feel like we're stuck with, because that was the style in those days. Whatever happened to this little tall, slender, hand-carved wooden mantles that would have been here before? Well, this family didn't want them. They already own the mirrors. You can't have the tall mirrors on top of tall mantles. They probably threw them away, burned them up. I'm lucky enough to have found one of them in my home. I still have one of the old 200-year-old mantles, and I wouldn't sell it for anything. But black marble was the in thing, though I don't like it. It's not my favorite. 12 of them all over this house. Well, this house was restored in the 1840s. It's much older than that. They had lived in 2 antebellum homes up Washington Street behind me. Now, these one-way streets, if you pilgrims think you're the only ones that don't like one-way streets, let me tell you right now, we Natchezians can't stand them. I imported the Bible. I got corrected. I thought it came from the book of Revelations, and one of my listeners happened to be a preacher. He sent me home, and I had to read the book of Daniel. That's the hardest book in the whole Bible to read, and my quote comes from Daniel. We call these one-way streets the abomination of desolation. Sometimes we tell you, dear pilgrims, you can't get there from here. Just park your car and walk over there. I think we said that the most often when a good-looking movie at the wall, how rich the family was. Don't you think in this house they're rather unnecessary? Oh, they make pretty nice lighting equipment, but to me they're rather redundant. Everybody knew how rich they were. They owned a bank down
on Main Street, and it's still there. Notice how they spell the name Kuntz with 2 O's. With the old Bible on the floor over here, going on 500 years old, spells Kuntz, K-U-N-T-Z. They came from Germany over 200 years ago, coming to Natchez by way of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the name Kuntz has been changed to K-O-O-N-T-Z.
This is the back parlor. In this corner, we have the Friendship Teacup collection and fan collection that belonged to Mrs. Kuntz. Here we have a model of great leaves. This shows you just how big this house really is. It's a lot bigger than it looks. Over here, we have a picture of Virginia wearing a human hair cross necklace. And this is her sister when she was queen of the Confederate pageant in 1940. This is the hair jewelry and her sister's tiaras right there. They throw nothing away, so everything is full of memorabilia. And there's a piece of cake in there from 1957. To the cake, Robert E. Lee by a family member. That's Robert E. Lee when he was president of Washington College, which is now Washington and Lee. You can now...
You're in the dining room and you're seeing 6 generations of wedding presents and heirlooms here. The table's mahogany and it will span to seat 12 people very easily and very comfortably. When I say seat 12 people very comfortably, all 12 chairs to this set have arms. When you look around the room, you see 3 sideboards in this room. Each one is very beautiful and very unique. First is this piece of mahogany. It has 3 shelves, 3 drawers, and 3 doors. Next is this piece right here. This was made by a Natchez craftsman out of Walnut, for this corner of the room. It's not going to fit anywhere else in the room. Notice the depth of it. It's great for oversized serving trays. It's also known as a plantation serving table. Third piece is this little gem. This is hand-carved rosewood. And I really don't have to say anything about it. It says it to you itself. It's beautiful. I've been trying for 6 years to figure out how to get it out of this house down the street, 2 blocks from my house, without family missing it. On the table, we have the placemats and table runner of Duchess lace. That's a bobbin type lace. And in front here, we have the jump ahead of myself. We have the Chelsea tea set with the milk toast cup, coffee cup, and teacup. I have a little friend, though, that says Papa Bear, Mama Bear, Baby Bear cup. Then there's also the Bohemian crystal. The crystal that looks so fragile, it looks like if you sneezed on it, it just would go poof, and you'd have nothing. On the far side of the table, we have the coin silver coffee pot and wasteful. Those pieces were made by the Natchez silversmith, George McPherson, and they were on display at the Smithsonian Institute with other pieces of the Natchez collection. Here are 2 of my favorite pieces, the wine decanter and the celery holder. This is Old Waterford, and the pattern is 1,000 dies, and I think you can see how the name came about. Isn't that great? To the back of the table, we have the cordial sets from each side of the family. This set came from the Britons, and this set came from the Kuntz. Do you all like strawberries, fresh ones? How would you like to have them out of this? The lid is all pierced, so when the strawberries are covered, they can still breathe. You walk into the room and you're greeted with that wonderful strawberry aroma. On either side of the door, we have the oil paintings by Chakal. That name is spelled C-H-A-K-E-L. The light fixtures and the chandelier were once gas, now electrified. They were made by Cornelius Baker of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They also made the chandeliers in Buckingham Palace and the Kremlin. The mantle is black Italianate marble, and the vases are old Paris. And in front here we have the little old plate warmer, predecessor of the microwave. Above the windows we have the cornices that are made of thin pieces of brass. And the windows themselves are called jib windows. They open up, the bottoms open in, and you can walk right out onto the balcony. Now I thank you all for coming in. Thank you. Enjoy.
It's a men's club. It got its name from this game of Boston, which was played with cards, and these are the pretty mother of pearl chips. This is another little Boston game that's not quite so fancy. This is Mahjong. I think everybody's familiar with that. And this cute little gadget is for cigars, and it's not working well today. See, it's gotten, must be the humidity or something. It usually just goes click, 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 click. There. I better leave it alone before I break it poor thing. Now the little marble game Virginia calls German tactics. That came over with her German ancestors, and it's still got the old clay marbles. And the gentleman in the portrait up here is William Britton. He was the founder of the Britton and Coons Bank that's still up on Main Street and still in operation, but not in this family any longer. Now the pretty bedroom over here was Virginia's mother's room behind you. You can peep in there and then go into the rose room if you like. You're welcome. Thank you for all your oral information. That was fun.
All of mine, those are all they made the plates here. And then they sent them to France, right?
Right.
To be fired.
The China was French.
Aquí viven, ¿verdad?
Different flower designs.
Oh, okay. Oh, it might have been one. You turned it around and people thought you had different ones.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for being here on such a beautiful day. And it's always a treat to see the American Queen pull into Vicksburg. And she pulled in just before dinner time, I think, and tied up. But she's a gorgeous vessel and comes out of New Orleans down there, and it's the company is called the Delta Steamboat Line. They have 3 vessels, passenger vessels. This is the largest one and the newest one, and she's about 3 to 4 years old now. But she'll sleep about 430 passengers plus crew, and then the next boat underneath her, the middle-sized boat, would be the Mississippi Queen. She sleeps about 375 passengers plus crew. And then the boat they got started out with, the Delta Queen, she's a pretty thing and smaller, of course, and she sleeps about 170 passengers plus crew. But the way you catch out on one of these vessels, you call the Delta Steamboat Line down in New Orleans and express an interest that you may be interested in going out on a trip on one of their boats some particular month and however many days you want to ride and what part of the river you want to ride on. And they send you a little package and get you all fixed up. It's primarily like booking out on an ocean liner trip. You just make plans ahead of time that you want to go. And of course, they'll wine you, dine you, and sport you, and court you. You feel like you'd have to go to heaven to get a better deal out there. Now, those smokestacks on this vessel have hydraulic lifts on it. You may see that hydraulic arm there on the north side of them. And when they go under the bridge, they're too tall. They have to mash a button and lay those smokestacks down, and they'll go forward. And they got a little carriage up there that the things lay down on until they get underneath the bridge, and they mash the button, and the thing rises back up in the air. But they have ground transportation. These real nice motor coaches meet the boats up and down the river when they pull into port, and so the passengers have a way to go to visit different attractions and have transportation waiting for them when the boat pulls in to do some things around the town.
That's when they raised the American flag in 1863. Lowered the
Well, we're going to turn on downstream here and maybe get that little northeast breeze back. And the Mississippi's downriver over our left shoulder, about a mile from where we are right now. We're on a small river at this time. It's called the Yazoo River. And the old Yazoo, she flows down through our Delta farmland for about 175 miles. And we can navigate it upstream there about 175 miles behind us. But this was part of the old Mississippi River when the war was being fought around here. So later on in our tour, I'll explain to y'all how the river was running when the war was fought here, and how the river changed, and some other things concerning the river. That old swampy looking land on our right over there is part of the state of Louisiana, and it's an island. They named that island over there DeSoto Island after the Spanish explorer Fernando de Soto. Y'all recall your history books told us that Mr. de Soto was exploring territory for Spain along the waterway around the early 1500s. And feel free to move around on the boat if those in the back of the boat get too windy on you, too cool. The closer you stand up to the windshield up there, the less breeze you'll get. And we're going to poke along down through here where these barges are, but once we get out on the main stream, I'm warm and toasted. It's been in the last 5 years now that the casino industry became legalized here in Mississippi. We do have 4 active casinos in our immediate area. The one on our left over here is called Harrah's Casino. And between here and our river bridges, we'll pass alongside the Isle of Capri and the Maristar. And there'll be another casino below our river bridge called Rainbow Casino. These casinos float around in a coffin dam, and once we get down around our river bridges down there where we can see a Maristar Casino real well, and we can see their coffer dam real well, I'll talk to you about it, but this coffer dam on the left over here is underwater right now, so that's why we'll wait until we get downstream where we can see a coffer dam that's not underwater. But the river's kind of high right now because it's the springtime, and all that ice and snow melts out up north, and all them rains up around the Yankee States, and all that water has to run off, come down through here to the Gulf of Mexico. In the summertime, the water will be about 20, 25 foot deep out here on average. Right now, it's about 40 to 50 foot deep. Those fellas tied up to the barge over there in that little small boat. They're trying to catch them a mess of catfish. It's a pretty good spot to fish because unload grain in the barges and out of barges over there. They have a tendency to sprinkle a little bit of it off in the river occasionally. And some of them old fish are pretty well corn fed up over there. Down here in our state of Mississippi, agriculture is our #1 industry, and we raise primarily cotton and soybeans up in our delta, some corn and some wheat and other crops. Down here on the lower Mississippi River, there is a good many of these bunching grain elevators like that one, and for the purpose of loading and unloading grain barges. Now, a good bit of that grain will leave out of here in railroad cars and 18-wheelers. I expect Mr. Kellogg's cornflakes, they get their share of it. Some of the cattle feedlots around the country, and maybe some other industries that use grain into their products. Here it looks like a good-sized towboat pushing a good many barges upriver, or either he's holding back down there to wait a downstream, wait for a downstream boat to come through, but we'll get out there and see what they're doing here in just a little while. I suspect that some of y'all have already toured the battlefield, the military park out there, and some of you may be on the agenda for some of you later on, but there's an old Union ironclad gunboat sitting out there in the middle of the battlefield, named the USS Cairo, and about 14 miles up the river behind us, on December the 12th, 1862, the Confederates sunk that old gunboat to the bottom of the river. She lay down here in the bottom of the river buried in about 35 foot of sand and silt. Back in the early 60s, we decided to dig her up and finally got the old gunboat out of the bottom of the river here in 1964. Cleaned her up some and placed her out in the battlefield as a museum exhibit so folks could have a walk around on an old Union gunboat. Well, we sunk a good many of them around here, not near enough, but we came out on the shore and the stick, but at least it wasn't a Navy. They sent Mr. Ulysses S. Grant off down here, and he figured a way to stall us out and force us to surrender. Well, we'll get into that story with you a little later. And these are diesel fuel barges over here on the right. There's a couple of small boats that run a floating service station, and when the big boats call on diesel, they'll run out there with a fuel flat and fill up the big boat with diesel, and when a little fuel flat needs to be replenished, they'll come back in here to these reservoir barges and pump the little fuel flat full, get ready for the next boat that may be calling. It's pretty mud out there a little later on. First thing we're going to do, though, is stick around the corner to the right and see if there's anything coming down the river that we need to pay any attention to, and if it looks like it's going to be clear for us to run, we'll run on out there and get in the big river and give you some background information about it. And you'll be quite a bit more familiar with it today before we get off on our trip. barges. These are pushing up the river here. And you may notice over that lead barge, that first barge poking out over there, and then there's this black barge right over here, the closest one to us. Looks like a couple of wore-out TV antennas dragging in the river. And those are phytometers. They measure how deep the water is out there ahead of him and register electronically up in his pilot house. So he'll know at all times how deep the river is in front of him, so in the minute he starts to run it into shallow water, it won't alter his course. Now, all those empty barges are held together at every intersection with big old wire steel cables. They tighten up the ratchets to hold them firmly against one another so they won't be bouncing and jiggling around. And his boat is pressed up to the back of the barges there with big wire steel cables. They tighten up electric winches to hold him tight against the barges so he can navigate those things with rudders. He's got some big old rudders underneath the stern of that thing. And he drives it just like you would an ocean liner. We'll get a little closer to him here and talk about him. And, well, there's one down below the bridge. There's two of them coming up. They sure enough got some barges in front of them, one of them in particular down there. So a lot of these boats nowadays are running 8,000 to 10,000 horsepower, and some of them very capable of pushing 30 and 40 barges at a time. And that's a 3-engine boat. You can tell by 3 smokestacks, 3 chimneys there. So that tells you it's got 3 big old rudders, 3 big old engines down there, and 3 big old propellers underneath the bank. And a boat that size there usually carries a crew of around 12 to 14 employees. You got some working down there in the engine room. Then you have your deck force that keeps the boat all cleaned up, the barges tightened up. Well, he's got some loaded barges out in the middle there, I see. But then you got your captains relieving each other around the clock. Mr. George and I like the cooks the best out there because when you catch out on one of these boats, you're going to plan on riding at least 30 days or more before you get any time off. So they need to feed you real good, and you'll be kind of thinking about maybe quitting on them and getting home to mama's cooking at the next town. You may notice the radar antennas on top of the boat going round and round. These boats run 24 hours a day now. Just because it gets dark out here doesn't mean they shove into the bank and tie up. They run them around the clock. Surfboard, and it was the middle of summer. We catch on that thing there. It was a pretty good ride up the river. But he probably averaged about 6-7 miles an hour upstream with that load there. Well, let me tell y'all a little bit about the Mississippi River, and then we'll run straight across over there and look around at the casinos and go down below our river bridges and see what else we can get into. And some of y'all now maybe have already traveled up around. Down there where he's going, if he takes a left, he's going to go down to Baton Rouge in New Orleans. If he takes a right, though, he's going to be coming across the bridge here toward Monroe and Shreveport, Louisiana, and on out that way. But so we'll liable to see the train come across in a little while. But back over our left shoulder, there's a big tall hill there. I see some vehicles parked around it, some folks sitting on the rail up there. And that hill is called the Naval Circle. And down here behind that next casino downstream, the Veristar, at the end of the old bridge where the tall trees are over there, there's a cannon sitting on top of a big hill down there. It's called the Naval Circle. And both of those hills played a vitally important part in Vicksburg safety during the river campaign. So I'll be sharing that information with you coming back upstream. And also at the foot of that big hill over our left there, back over there, there's a 17-acre riverfront park full of barbecue pits and picnic tables, playground equipment, conference stations and everything. So y'all gonna be around some more and the weather's pretty. Y'all might want to go by and pick you up a sandwich or a box of chicken legs or something. Go down there and sit on the bench. Enjoy looking out across the river, no one on the boat. It's been all a 4 4 years ago now, some folks out of Jackpot, Nevada, they call themselves Cactus Pete, and they built that Ameristar, and it looks pretty big, but I think I haven't been down on our Gulf Coast, but down there around Gulfport, Biloxi, up around Tunica, Mississippi, which is close to Memphis, they got casinos in that area. I think they're pretty good size casinos versus what we got around our area. But I mentioned about a coffin dam to y'all earlier, and when the state of Mississippi approved casino gambling on our waterway, they made a lot of rules and regulations on these folks. First of all, they told them, they said, y'all are not going to be able to take people out on a river cruise and gamble with them. Y'all will have to be permanently moored dockside against the bank so folks get on and off whenever they want to. They also told them there has to be a floating. So they all decided for various reasons, mostly economic reasons, the best thing for themselves to do is to get themselves to build them a cofferdam. And a cofferdam is basically the same thing as a bathtub is in your home. It has 4 walls that hold water. So that concrete base of that thing over there and those little rusted sheet metal piling circles would be the west wall of the cofferdam that they're floating around in, a little swimming hole, a reservoir. Yeah, we can see that cannon pretty good there on top of that hill there at the end of the old bridge where the tall trees are. Oh, yeah. That's the Naval Circle we'll visit more about coming upstream. He's got mostly loaded barges pushing up the river. He's got a couple of empties hanging out on the front there, but everything else looks pretty much like loaded. They'd be drawing about 9 or 10 foot of water. The folks before either one of these bridges was built down here at Vicksburg in the early days. There used to be 2 large steamboat ferry boats running around here. One was named the Albatross, and one of them's name was the Pelican. They stayed kind of busy shoving them pretty Model A and 2 Model 4s across the river. And then when a train would pull up, they could hold about a dozen railroad cars. But in 1930, they completed that black bridge above our heads. And nowadays, the Kansas City Railroad comes across. We see the engines coming across as we speak. And we'll turn around here in a minute, going upstream. We can see the old Teacup coming across. So nowadays, the Kansas City Railroad runs across it. Ball Bell, AT&T, and Sprint, they have a phone line across it. And on the north side of it up there, United Gas Line, they have a gas line running across the old bridge. This Interstate I-20 bridge we're fixing to float underneath right now in comparison hasn't been here all that long. This boat coming up the river has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 across the front, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 42 empty barges that boat's pushing coming up river. And those are empty grain barges. And what has happened now all up in the Midwestern states like Iowa, Illinois, Kansas, Nebraska, and Oklahoma, they've been unloading last year's harvest of corn and wheat out of the elevators and silos, shipping it down the river in loaded barges. Now what it is, boats come down the river with them barges and they drop them off down there around New Orleans and Baton Rouge where ships come in, and they pick up the empties that are waiting for them when they get down there with the load. So they come back upriver with the empties. Now when they get back up to wherever they're going, they'll have a bunch of more loaders waiting on them, and they'll drop the empties off up there and then catch on to the load and bring them on down the river. And that's the way they do. They just recycle back and forth, back and forth. Loaded barges down and empty barges back up. Well, investors own a lot of them. Some of the barge companies is owned by, people, investors own them. And sometimes individuals got money to invest in barges, own them. Corporations, just folks with money, I reckon. The only thing I know, I can't buy one of them, own one of them. dangerous situations. Now, they've hit the bridge too many times over the years. They sunk quite a few barges, but thank goodness they haven't knocked the old bridge down yet. That's about as pretty and nice as it comes right there. And that's another 3-engine boat. Automated. And it's on. Well, if we can say one thing today, y'all got to see what takes place around here as far as boats and barges and commerce on the Mississippi River. We got out here at a time when there was plenty of traffic for us to see. Side River, the state of Louisiana. And most all the trees growing along the riverbank here would either be a cottonwood or willow or a sycamore. And they're very thirsty trees. They like to grow down close to the water's edge where there's plenty for to drink. And the primary demand is used for the cottonwood, willow, sycamore would be for pulp and paper. The paper industries really utilize a lot of those type of trees to make quality pulp and paper. Now, if y'all have been down here in springtime, 3 years ago, the water was about 12 foot deep in the woods over there. It was high enough that we could take the boat and go right through the opening in the trees. And all the way underneath that old tower over there, about a mile to the Louisiana levee. And it was kind of interesting because when the water gets high like that, it chases all the deer and the wild turkey and hogs and other critters that live in the woods up on high ground in the levee. So it's kind of like going to the zoo. When we were back in there springtime 3 years ago. Now, across the river over there to the left where that big old chimney is over there smoking in that big structure, there's a power plant. It's called Baxter Wilson. And they use natural gas and number 6 fuel oil for energy to operate the plant off of. And further down the river, about 25 miles, there's a nuclear power plant down there at Grand Gulf, but this one here is a conventional type electrical plant. But I had one of those fellows that worked at the plant ride the boat with me about 3 years ago, and he asked me if I had any idea about how much electricity would be going across the wires above our head up there, and I had no idea. And he said, well, you can figure for every 2 wires stretched across there would equal something like 500,000 volts of electricity. So I just looked at him kind of strange. Of course, the reason these towers are like this is we sell some of our electricity to Louisiana over here, they'll send them a little bill for it every month. Paint that chimney back here. Homeowners there, I can't read that much. Those are petroleum barges there. They look different from the cargo barge. Up here, so we're going to have kind of a lull in our trip here. I won't have that much any information to share with you till we get back to the bridge, so it's a good time to, if you want to, catch your little cat nap or visit with your neighbors, or if them knees are starting to bother you, feel free to stand up, get the kinks out, and then if anybody enjoys smoking or chewing tobacco or spitting or something, come back here with me and Mr. George are, and you can do that, won't get on nobody, won't